Hey everyone, welcome to the Killed Off Screen podcast. My name is Joe, and I'm joined by my friend, co-host, and bracket booster, Prentice.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast with the best horror news and reviews. Today, we're going to do a bit of a March Madness style bracket where we have some zombie movie classics face off against each other. But before that, first we have some news, and I think I'm starting with the news this week. So the first one I'm gonna talk about. I don't know if this is strictly a horror franchise, but it's close enough. The Crow is getting a reboot, starring Bill Skarsgård, and it's gonna come out in June of this year. And I hadn't heard anything about this before this week, so either it's an insanely quick turnaround, or they've kept this under wraps, or I haven't been paying attention.
Yeah, I think I saw something about that a while back, and maybe this didn't stand out to me because I actually haven't seen The Crow. And I try not to report on anything that's kind of like a reported possible remake. I only really did with Texas Chainsaw last week because I wanted to rant about modern Texas Chainsaw installments. So that was just kind of a springboard for me. But yeah, I think I did see that with The Crow. And you said we already have a release date, or is it just like the month?
It says June. I'm unsure. Let me see if there is a specific release date. Looks like June 7th on 2024. So I'm entirely unsure what that will go up against. It's a pretty typical Friday release date, but seems kind of interesting that it's kind of an early summer movie. They might be banking on it being a blockbuster, but not enough to compete with the kind of big movies that are going to come out in July. I'm pretty sure there's a Marvel movie coming out in July. Stuff like that. So, they've got to have some faith in it if they're not pushing it out in January to die with all the rest of the bad movies.
Yeah, I'm surprised they're doing that, and I'm happy you brought that up. Because, yeah, summer, that's when all the big blockbuster movies are coming out. Like you said, the Marvel movies, all of those, like your big crowd-pleasing type of movies. I don't know, your Fast and Furious and your Jurassic World and everything. Sorry if, my speech is a little more messed up than usual or fast. Earlier, I was going through a lot of these damn movies for the bracket to try to get through as many as I could, the ones I hadn't seen yet. And I'm very caffeine sensitive, and I had a Alani energy drink that has 200 milligrams of caffeine.
Oh man!
So yeah,
I
think
Joe's gonna be
typically
doped
talk
up.
pretty fast.
Joe's gonna be doped up, and I have COVID, so we're on two on two separate ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, it's a great time for recording, but yeah, I feel like I already talk pretty quick, so I'm gonna try to.
Oh, it'll be all right. We've got a lot of movies to get through in this bracket, so speed might not be our enemy.
Yeah,
but yeah, I reckon maybe it might be competing with Godzilla and Kong, whatever that new one is, Godzilla X Kong. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, because that'll release right at the end of March, so maybe not. I thought that was a May release date. Man, they might not have as much faith in Godzilla X Kong as people have in The Crow remake, which is insane.
yeah, and the reason it's surprising to me is because The Crow is more of a cult movie. It's not a beloved classic, It's not one of those that I feel like if you go up to a lot of people and you start asking them about that movie, they're just going to be like, "What the fuck is The Crow? Get out of here! What are you talking about?"
Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sure I watched it when I was really young and thought it was really cool, and that's all I remember of the movie. So maybe it's time to give it a rewatch before this comes out. But yeah, no, I just thought that was really interesting. Bill Skarsgård was Pennywise, I believe, in the new It movies. I thought he was really good. Very good physical actor as well. So yeah, I'm excited to see him in that.
Yeah, he was good in Barbarian as well. And we do have some more release dates on that subject. We have one for Longlegs, at least if Wikipedia is to be believed, July 12th. So I'm happy because we have a release date, and I'm also bummed because I have to wait a very long time to watch a movie I'm very excited for, but that will just make me savor it more when I sit down to watch it. Again, provided the finished product is as good as the trailers are hyping it up to be. I've had some times where I've been disappointed, like Last Night in Soho and Men, which I don't hate either of those movies, but I don't love them. I think they're just kind of okay. So hopefully it's not a situation like that, and it's everything that I hope it's going to be. But yeah, for like the third or fourth episode in a row talking about Long Legs, really hyped for it.
Yeah, we're both looking forward to that movie a lot, I think. And speaking of release dates, this one might be more for me than for you. But Killer Clowns from Outer Space, the video game, has officially announced its release date. It'll be out on June 4th of this year. And you know what? I'm excited. I think I will be getting this game, whether it's on Xbox Game Pass and I have that at the time that it comes out, or if I just pay out of pocket to get the game. I think it looks really fun. Killer Clowns is a really fun kind of brand identity to build around. And I'm just, it seems fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, really fun movie. That's when I'm happy I got to watch in a theater, and some people actually had like really good costumes for like some of the clowns in the movie. I think one was dressed as like Fatso. Yeah, really fun. That was a great theater experience. I also got to bring a friend who had never seen Killer Clowns. So yeah, that was a great time. But yeah, I don't play a ton of games, so that most likely won't be for me. But I mean, I hope it's good. And obviously I hope the people who do decide to buy it get their money's worth. And then another one that you're probably going to be excited for, as well as myself after watching the trailer and reading more about it, is Late Night with the Devil. We have a release date for that as well. It's March 22nd, not even a month away.
I'm excited for that. Yeah, that's that might actually end up competing with Godzilla X Kong.
Long Legs? Oh, my
no,
bad.
not that it will compete with Godzilla X Kong in the box office, but yeah, I think if that movie turns out as well as the trailer kind of impacted me. I don't know if you've taken the time to kind of watch that trailer. But I watched that trailer at like 1 a.m. the first time I watched it, and that was not a good time. Like, I'd just woken up. I was going to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and I was like, ooh, new movie trailer. Clicked on it. Absolutely terrified me in the middle of the night because I was delirious from being asleep, being in REM sleep like 10 minutes prior. And now I'm really excited for that movie just based on that. And I think if it's as good as that interaction, if it's as good as that experience of me being like post REM sleep terrified, then it's going to be an amazing movie.
Yeah, and we talk about a lot of movies that we love, but I'm more excited for it because I don't hear you often talk about horror movies in any way like emotionally affecting you. You talked about that with the ending of The Borderlands or Final Prayer, but it's not a common thing I hear from you. And so, yeah, that makes me even more excited to check it out myself because I love, obviously, when a horror movie can put me in that. I mean, we enjoy them for the art that they are, even if we don't always feel emotionally affected, but it's always a very special treat whenever we do. But I do have another one that I'm very excited for. It's S. Craig Zahler, who is one of my favorite directors right now, even though he's primarily a writer. Those of you who, of course, are in the horror space, which I imagine you are, you're watching this podcast, or listening rather, probably know him for Bone Tomahawk, but he's also made Dragged Across Concrete, as well as Brawl in Cell Block 99, and has written a ton of books, screenplays, music, etc. He kind of just steps into the director's chair whenever he's given an opportunity, which is not often enough. I need it to be like a Christopher Nolan situation. I need an S. Craig Zahler movie like every year, and we are at a rate where we're getting them like every 4 years or something. His last one, which was going to be Hug Chicken Penny, based on one of his books, got scrapped due to lack of financing, which made me very sad. But I somehow missed this last month on his own blog, his online journal. He posted that he has movie news coming. It's nothing confirmed. He said it's his next directorial effort. And either way, I am really, really excited. You know how much I am a fan of his work. People listening can already tell how big a fan I am of his work. So I really hope that comes to fruition.
Yeah, I really like Bone Tomahawk. It's the only piece of his work that I've seen. Although you've spoken really highly about Brawl and Cell Block 99 and Dragged Across Concrete, so I'm just as excited. I'd love to see something more in his visual style.
For sure. It's very grounded. It reminds me a lot of Kiyoshi Kurosawa, who, of course, is another favorite director of mine. It's like very minimal music, very carefully framed, static, wide shots for the most part. It's just very simple. And then again, because he's primarily a writer, it's a lot of his movies are really carried by performances as well as the screenplay. And yeah, his casts are always amazing. I think Brawl is probably my least favorite. I think Dragged Across Concrete is actually my favorite, slightly more than Bone Tomahawk. It's pretty close. But yeah, I rewatched both Brawl and Dragged Across Concrete like not too long ago. I put on Brawl as like something in the background while I was making dinner one night, and I ended up just sitting down and watching the whole thing. So yeah, really hyped for that. And then I have one more, if that's okay.
I also have one more.
This may be the biggest thing we've announced on here. Not that like we're breaking it.
Oh, we're not.
Like,
we don't.
Nobody
break
else has the news or anything. Yeah, we don't. We obviously don't have like any kind of like inside scoop with anybody. But yeah, A24 are producing a Friday the 13th show, directed by Brian Fuller of Hannibal, and it should be featuring Adrian King, who was Alice in the original Friday the 13th movie. So that I'm really hyped for. It's been what, 15 years? 15 years since we've gotten any official Friday movie show, etc. media, if you want to call it that.
So we've talked about this Friday TV show offline in the past because they've been trying to make a Friday TV show for 10 years. And we've talked about like legally who owns the rights. What's up with all this bullshit going on in the background? And I'm excited. A24 doing it is awesome. I'm excited for this. The fact that it's by the people who did Hannibal, I'm super excited about because I really like Hannibal as a TV show. I think it's great. I think if they were gonna put two and two together and make a Friday TV show, they couldn't have picked a better studio, and they probably couldn't have picked a better horror TV show writer outside of like Flanagan, and I don't think Friday's really in his wheelhouse.
I don't know. He adapted Doctor Sleep really well. He very clearly has a high level of respect for the horror properties he works with. So I think, I mean, I would trust Mike Flanagan with just about any horror property, honestly. But I get what you mean in terms of it just being like a stripped down slasher concept. You know, I get what you mean.
Yeah. All right. Last bit of news. Lionsgate, that studio that sometimes makes good movies but often is chasing money, is earlier we said we don't talk a lot about rumors, stuff like that, but one of these at least feels pretty much certain to happen, because they are plotting a new American Psycho movie. And it's probably going to be a remake. I'd be ecstatic if it wasn't. I'd love Christian Bale to come back and just do a follow-up to that movie. I think that'd be more interesting than a remake, just to see whatever they can come up with and have him come back and be Bateman again and see all that just crazy shit that followed the first movie would be awesome. And they're also showing interest in a remake of The Dead Zone, which I'm way less interested in, and honestly, just let it be dead. You don't need to remake The Dead Zone.
Yeah, that's one of the Cronenberg jams I haven't watched, along with like The Brood and Shivers, some of those late 70s, early 80s. I think Dead Zone was like 83. So yeah, that was right around Videodrome and before The Fly, the much more beloved ones. So yeah, that wasn't on my radar. Again, that's a surprising one. It's one where you really start thinking like, damn, they're really just at the bottom of the barrel, huh? Like, you know, The Dead Zone is getting a remake. Not that I think it's a bad movie or anything. Again, I haven't seen it. I'm willing to bet it's good because it's David Cronenberg when he was like around the height of his career. But yeah, it's a surprising pick for sure.
Yeah, but that's kind of, I think, it for the news. Do we want to get into our bracket brawl?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. I'll quickly explain how we put this together. So we have 64 zombie movies, my rule was I went off Letterboxd for a lot of this. The movies that I gathered, it's a very popular platform now. So the rule was they had to have at least 10,000 views. When I started seeing around that number, anything less were a lot of movies that like I had even never heard of. Because of course you start getting into zombie movies. That's like slashers where for every one that you're familiar with, there's like a million that you've never heard of, made by like a couple people for $6 in their backyard. So you could just go forever. But yeah, they had to have at least 10,000 views to make sure that people listening are aware of the majority of the movies. And then I did seed this bracket, so it's not random. I did go off of average rating. So I organized that from highest to lowest and I seeded it that way. And if two of them had the same score, so like I think two of them had like a 3.9 out of 5, right? Then I did it by the one that had that rating with more votes, so like a higher sample size. So there was a little bit of a science into this. And you just want to go ahead and get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, starting with the upper left side of our bracket, we have the 1 seed against the 16. Our number 1 overall seed, which is One Cut of the Dead. This is a comedy, and it's kind of cheating. This isn't even like really a zombie movie. It's a movie about like people making a zombie movie. Also, we're going to talk about these movies a bit because, you know, that's what this podcast is for. So you may be spoiled for some of these. Just keep that in mind. If you're worried about being spoiled for, I don't know, like Resident Evil Extinction, then go watch that dumpster fire. But yeah, so we have One Cut of the Dead versus our absolute lowest seed, House of the Dead by Uwe Boll.
Yeah, it's One Cut of the Dead. Look, I haven't seen all of these movies. I'm pretty sure Joe also hasn't seen all of these movies. We took different approaches to being prepared for this. I have COVID and I'm in law school. So I have a lot of, I don't have a lot of time on my hand, and I had to sleep twice as much as normal the last week or so, the last 5 or 6 days. So I watched clips from all of these movies. Joe tried to watch as many of them as possible. I watched one clip from House of the Dead and thought this is the worst zombie movie I've seen in a long time. And I don't need to watch any more of this. And how did it make this bracket? So it's got to be One Cut of the Dead, because One Cut of the Dead is delightful.
Yeah, One Cut of the Dead I've seen several times. It's such a fun movie, and it's like a feel-good movie, too. I can watch that if I'm in a really bad mood, and it's impossible for me to not feel happy after watching it. The music, just the overall idea of it, it's very funny, and it's very creative, too. The first act is like a 40 or 45-minute one-take zombie short, and then I don't want to say anything afterward. It's the best viewing experience you can get, is to not know anything about Act 2 and 3, even though I already kind of fucked up on that by talking about it at the beginning of the bracket, but whatever. But yeah, great movie, and it's easily going to be One Cut of the Dead, because House of the Dead is an absolute dumpster fire. Also, take a drink every time you hear of the dead, and if you really want to get hammered, then just take a drink every time you hear the word dead throughout this entire program that you're going to watch. Don't
do that. If you take a drink every time you hear the word dead, you will end up having to take a drink at your own funeral.
Yeah, you're probably going to need your stomach pumped. You're gonna
bad idea.
Need medical attention.
Don't listen to Joe about drinking games.
All right, moving on to our second matchup. We're going to go down the upper left side of the bracket. This is our 8 and 9 seed. We have The Sadness, the 2021 movie, versus Rec 2. It's a harder one.
Here's the thing. I think between these two movies, if you can stomach them, The Sadness is a more entertaining movie. I don't like that movie. I think it's trying too hard to be something that we don't really need in horror and just in movies in general. I appreciate and I applaud the effort that went into the movie, and for the people whose jam The Sadness is, it's gonna be your jam. You're gonna love it. Rec 2's nothing to me. but I think I'd rather have a nothing movie that's just gonna lose to One Cut of the Dead than The Sadness.
Yeah, these are fighting very hard to immediately lose in the next round to One Cut of the Dead. But and yeah, a lot of these first round matchups are going to be really easy because again, it is a seeded bracket. But once we start getting into like 2 and 3, I think it's going to really start getting hard, and we're going to fight each other more. But yeah, with this, I watched The Sadness recently, and I actually didn't do it for this bracket. I actually didn't have it on here at first because it's a zombie movie in spirit, you know?
Yeah.
They're not like exactly fully zombies by the definition that we would go by, but it's definitely at least close enough. I think a lot of people would expect it to be on here.
Yeah, I think also for people listening to this who haven't heard of The Sadness, it's a oh shoot, it's not Korean.
I think it's Thai.
I was gonna say it's
I could
Thai,
be
but
wrong,
I
or, like,
can't remember.
Indonesian.
It's a East Asian horror movie about a sickness that starts to infect people, and it doesn't quite make them zombies, but it does make them just do the most depraved shit ever. So it's extraordinarily gory. It's really fucked up. They're clearly going for that as a concept. And it didn't land for me, but I appreciate what they were trying to do, and I appreciate how well it's carried out. But for me, yeah, I'm casting my vote for Rec 2.
Yeah, I half agree. I think it's fairly well made. It's very competent. And I do not agree. I do not like the sentiment. I think this movie... So the illness that Prentice is talking about is just COVID. Like, it's supposed to be a direct parallel to COVID. Really?
I missed that completely. For me, I was just...
Oh, it's okay.
There are so many horror movies that I watch that are along the lines of like a Hostel or a Saw, where people are like, well, clearly the idea is this. And I'm like, no, someone just wanted to make a fucked up horror movie, and they did. Eli Roth just likes making those movies. Just let him make those movies. For me, that's what it was. I was like, some horror director from... I really should look up what country this is, but some horror director is trying to break out and wants to do some crazy exploitation gore fest movie. And that's what I thought it was. I did not think of it being COVID at all.
In the movie, it's directly supposed to be like the beginning of it with like I don't know the word. I'm not a scientist, but like the particles they're looking at. You know, if you look at like an illness under a microscope and you see like the particle or whatever, like the form of it is like directly similar to what actual COVID molecules, I think that's the word, or cells or whatever look like. And then the way they talk about it on the news and everything, it's supposed to be COVID. I don't want to talk too much longer about this, but
it's not worth
I thought this movie was exploitative. I thought this movie was what I like to call endurance tests, where it's not meant to really be entertaining or anything. I do not like it. And it's not one where I really felt challenged or disturbed or unsettled by anything, because I felt it was just trying too hard to be that. Like, I kind of figured what was going to happen in it, and everything that I figured was going to happen happened. Again, I don't think it's poorly made. I don't think it's a bad movie, but I do think it's very depraved. I don't enjoy it. And Rec 2 is pretty fun. We haven't really talked about Rec 2. It's kind of the Aliens to Rec's Alien. It takes place in the same building. It's very short. It's very snackable as a movie. And yeah, it's pretty fun. So Rec 2 is gonna get my vote, unless you have any more to say on this.
I just gotta jump in and say, comparing Rec 2 to Aliens is disgraceful. I can't let that slide.
No. I'm not trying to say that in terms of quality.
I know what you're trying to say. I know what you're trying to say. But I just need to step in and say, for Joe's sake and for mine, we're not directly comparing them. It's just more of an action movie that's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
It's not comparable to Aliens in any other capacity.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to say that it was.
Yeah, I had to make it clear.
Protect me. That's fine. Yeah. For my protection, that's fine. All right, we're moving on to our third matchup in the first round. This is the 5 versus the 12 seed. This is The Beyond by Lucio Fulci versus Resident Evil Extinction.
I have so few thoughts about both of these movies, which is just it's, I don't know. The Beyond is a movie that exists. I appreciate it being, in theory, a Western. because I love a horror Western. I think other than that, it's really forgettable. And someone's gonna listen to this and be like, "It's my favorite zombie movie. How could you say that?" Cool. Like, everyone's different. Weirdly, I think my vote is gonna be for Resident Evil Extinction, because I think about half of the Resident Evil movies are movies that are just in that sweet spot of being bad but being really fun, so you can just kind of put them on and not think about them. And I think it's also the one with the most of oh god, what's her name? Mila Jovovich in leather, in like a leather bodysuit, if I remember correctly. I could be thinking of a different
At
one.
least some of them, yeah.
Yeah, but and that's worth
Maybe
that's worth the price of admission, honestly.
Yeah, that is kind of what the Beyond and a lot of these movies are missing when you kind of get me to think about it. But no, I'm going to firmly vote for the Beyond. I watched that one pretty recently. It is your typical Lucio Fulci gore fest, but it is the best version. I think it's his most well-known and well-regarded movie. He's kind of a guy who made like a lot of the same stuff over and over again, like a lot of those kind of giallo Italian directors. But the Beyond is the best version of it. It's pretty fun. It's not exactly like a Zombie 2 or Zombie Flesh Eaters, which is on this bracket, and we will talk about that later, where you get like some fun gore. I mentioned this in the last episode too, with that movie in particular, where it's like fun gore and then you're just bored to tears for like 15 or 20 minutes. Now, the Beyond is actually fairly competent and very fun. Again, it's very short, and again, just about all the Resident Evil movies, like none of them are really good. I think Extinction, I don't know why I'm having a hard time saying that word tonight, but I think it's one of the better ones. It's definitely not as bad as a lot of the later ones, but I'm going to firmly
I've just looked
go
it up,
for
but
the
it's
Beyond.
not the Resident Evil movie I thought it was. And also, I really wasn't going to argue with you on this one either way, because I really have no thoughts.
You were
going
gonna
to
give it to me?
Yeah, so it's you can give it to the Beyond. I think it's fighting to lose to the next one as well.
Yeah, so going into the next one, this is our 4 seed versus 13. We have Zombieland versus Peninsula, the sequel to Train to Busan.
Okay, so for me, this is super easy. I love Zombieland.
Agreed.
Super fun movie, great performances all around, really great script. One of the best cameos in horror. By a man who will be featured pretty prominently in another movie on this list. And just super fun. I can't see a way that this does not win.
I was tempted to yell the name of the person you're alluding to, like Woody Harrelson.
I mean, go for it. It's
no, I'm not a very loud person. I didn't want to do that. But yeah, I think Peninsula kind of sucks. I will be honest. I tried to watch it quite a while back, and I cut it off halfway through. I thought Peninsula sucked ass. Especially the action sequences. They look terrible. You said this about Dawn of the Dead 04. And that at least kind of has an excuse because it's 2004. This was made in like 2020. Yeah, the action sequences look like a PS2 game. I like the first one on the boat. That was kind of cool. And then like all the ones where they're in like the SUV or whatever and like the ruins of the city. It looks so fake. It's like it just takes me out of the movie. Yeah, I thought Peninsula was terrible. Zombieland is really fun. So Zombieland's firmly going to get my vote. If you have anything more to add on those.
No, I fully agree. Just a super fun zombie.
Alrighty, moving into number 6 versus 11, we have Pontypool versus Zombieland Double Tap.
Okay, so here's where we come back around on Zombieland. I like Double Tap. I think it is fun. It's a step back from Zombieland. And I think Pontypool is really fun and a really interesting idea. And I think it is carried out really well. It's basically a box episode, which is always really intriguing to me when it's carried out well. So I think for me, Pontypool is going to get it. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's a delightful little Canadian horror movie where the zombie virus spreads through the English language. And it's very much a metaphor for colonialism in Canada. and just really well done, really well performed, really tight script because it was based on a book, I believe, or a stage play.
It was called Pontypool Changes Everything. Was the name of it?
I think it was originally written as a stage play as well. The script for the movie, at least. And yeah, just super fun, really interesting idea. They speak a lot of French because it's in Canada and the English language is a problem. So yeah, I don't know. It's for me, I'm voting Pontypool.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Double Tap. To me, it leans too much into like silly, goofy, lol, random kind of humor and gags. And I think Pontypool is one of the most inventive zombie movies. It's very slept on. Not a lot of people know about it, even people who are really big zombie fans. So really underrated movie. I'm not afraid to throw that word out there. So yeah, Pontypool is going to get my vote and move on to the next round. Moving on to the next round, it's going to be our number 3 versus number 14 seed, 28 Days Later versus Resident Evil Afterlife, I believe.
This is the one I was thinking of, I believe, where Mila Jovovich is just in a leather bodysuit the whole time.
No, sorry, this is not Afterlife. This is Retribution.
Yes.
These movies are so stupid, and their taglines are stupid and mean nothing, and I have to try to remember them, and I don't like it.
They're the same movie. All of these movies are
it is
the same.
Retribution.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, look, it's 28 Days Later. We don't have to keep talking about this. Shout out to the Resident Evil movies for still existing. Somehow 28 Days Later is, I mean, we're going to fight later, I think, over if it is a finalist or if it is a runner-up to being a finalist, but it's gotta go through here.
Yeah. I will be shocked if it doesn't make at least like Final 4 or maybe like Elite 8. But yeah, we'll see how it goes, how the matchups go. But yeah, Resident Evil Retribution, not good. 28 Days Later, goated movie. And that's really all that needs to be said. That's one of the easiest matchups to me in the entire first round, I believe.
It might be the easiest.
Yeah. Moving on to the next round, we have the number 7 versus number 10. This is Night of the Living Dead, not the original by Romero, but the Tom Savini 90s remake versus Dead Snow.
Oh, man. I'm gonna, not to really foreshadow the other side of the bracket, Night of the Living Dead is one of my favorite horror movies. It's one of my favorite movies. Yep. I think it's a landmark achievement for zombie movies and zombie literature. I'm not a big fan of the remake. I don't think it needed a remake. I really respect Savini. I appreciate the effort that went into this movie. Dead Snow's a lot of fun, but it's also a lot of nothing. So for me, this is just a coin toss. Because I think I get the same amount of enjoyment out of both of these movies. But I think I'd rather have kind of a silly movie go forward than a remake that I don't think ever was really necessary. So I think I'm gonna vote for Dead Snow.
Yeah, that's fair. And this is a hard one for me too. This is one of the harder ones. So we just went from maybe the easiest matchup in the first round to maybe the hardest for me, because I think both of these are okay. The Night of the Living Dead remake, I'm very torn because on one hand, yes, it's like, how dare you, sacrilege remaking such a beloved classic like we kind of talked about in the last episode with some movies. But I think it's actually one where just the technical merits, it serves a purpose having a remake to kind of upgrade it. Because that movie, as much as we love Romero and everything, and it's not the dunk on it, I love Night of the Living Dead as well, just as a film, it is pretty amateurish. It's very low budget. A lot of the people involved did not have really any experience. They're the kind of people where if you check their Wikipedia, their image on Wikipedia is a screenshot of them in the movie, because that was like all they did. And so again, not to dunk on it, I love it, but yeah, having it kind of upgraded with, Tom Savini gore effects is great. You got Tony Todd in there, you got Bill Moseley, so I like it, but I think I'm also going to vote for Dead Snow because Dead Snow is just really fun. I like its blend of horror and comedy. I like how over the top it is. And so, yeah, I think I'm just going to move Dead Snow along to the next round.
I think even just as a concept, if you compared the two concepts. One, if you said one is a Night of the Living Dead remake and the other one is frozen Nazi zombies in like Norway, you know which one you'd pick.
Yeah.
You'd pick the frozen Nazi zombies in Norway.
Yeah, you'd be like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. Let me check that out. Let me see what that's
crazy.
about. But going on to the next one, we have our number 2 versus number 15 seed. We have Romero's Day of the Dead versus Rec 4.
Is this why? Why is this a conversation? It's Day of the Dead. Rec 4 is awful. The Rec movies past Rec 2, you know what? They do kind of follow the Alien franchise in that after the second one, they just stop being good. And there's varying levels of enjoyment, but they're not good after that first and second one. And Day of the Dead's a classic. It's really good. I don't know how far it's going to get compared to some of the other things. It's definitely going to beat Dead Snow next round. No offense to Dead Snow.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's number 2 for a reason. It's a really good movie. It's got to go for it.
For sure. Yeah, Day of the Dead, that's another one that I very recently, like maybe 2 weeks ago, I rewatched that one. Again, not even just for the bracket, but just because I had rewatched Dawn recently, and I'm like, hey, I kind of want to watch Day of the Dead too, because that movie terrified me as a kid. The Savini gore effects. I remember the death scenes very well, and all of the gore horrified me as like a 12-year-old watching that. And I watched it a few years ago, and I think we had a conversation about it where I'm like, hey, I think Day of the Dead is actually not all that great. And then I rewatched it, and I'm like, no, Day of the Dead's really good. It's just very different. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Day of the Dead, great. And Rec 4, not great. Pretty much everything after Rec 2 is very, very bad, like Prentice said. So it's going to move on. Going into the bottom left side, we have our number 1 seed for this side of the bracket versus the number 16. We have Shaun of the Dead versus the Steve Miner late 2000s remake of Day of the Dead.
Okay. This also there's no debate here. It's Shaun of the Dead. I'm glad you moved it before you were moving that before I finished talking about it. Shaun of the Dead, also one of my favorite zombie movies, one of my favorite horror movies, a really just excellent movie about growth and change as you become an adult, and how you have to kind of grow both with and past the relationships you built as a child and as a teenager. And just kind of sandwiched in a really funny, surprisingly gory, really heartfelt zombie movie. Edgar Wright is a master at his craft, and he is on full display here. And I think, for me, Shaun of the Dead is the perfect balance of horror comedy in the zombie kind of subgenre, and pretty much the textbook example in horror as a whole.
Yeah, I completely agree with all accounts. And yeah, it's another one where I mentioned this in the Dawn of the Dead episode, but this is also one around that same time in a very, very short span. It was Dawn of the Dead 78, Dawn of the Dead remake, and Shaun of the Dead we watched. Me, my dad, and my siblings, we gathered in the living room and watched all of those in a very short time span. And yeah, there are some moments from Shaun of the Dead when I was a kid that really terrified me, that I thought were truly, really scary. I always remember the scene toward the end when they're in the Winchester and he kind of flips on the lights when he comes back after saying like, oh yeah, I gave him the slip. And he turns on the light playing with the circuit breaker, and like all the zombie silhouettes are behind him. You know, like outside the door by the glass and the curtain, I believe it was. Yeah, that like really scared me when I was a kid. And then like David's death in it. I think his name was David, the guy
gets dragged
who
to the
hated
window.
Shaun. Yeah,
That's
a great
brutal.
Yeah, so love Shaun of the Dead. Day of the Dead remake is like one of my least favorite movies in general. Prentice knows how much I hate this movie. And
I didn't want to say anything bad about it because you were gonna.
No, it's like I don't know if I want to dignify it by talking about it. It's crazy to me how Steve Miner, the man who basically brought Jason Voorhees as an adult to the big screen, he made 2 and 3 for Friday the 13th, and he made Lake Placid, which is fun. You know, you got Brendan Gleeson in that. He's always great. And then he made this, and it's like the absolute worst thing ever. The only thing I can say is that it actually does end with like a screamer jump scare into the camera, like that old video of a car driving through like the countryside or whatever. Like that is like basically the ending of the movie. And if that is not the most insulting thing, then I don't know what is. So yeah, F that movie. Shaun of the Dead moves on. Let's just get to the next one. All right. Next round, we have the 8 and 9 seed. We got The Night Eats the World. This is a French 2018 zombie movie versus 28 Weeks Later.
So I actually want you to talk about this first because I feel like you have a deeper connection to both of these movies, and I might be swayed by just your argument generally.
Sure. I think you're more high on 28 Weeks Later than I am. It's one where, not super recently, but like as an adult in the past like couple years, I rewatched it. It does not hold up very well outside of the opening. The opening to me is like maybe, without even trying to be hyperbolic, I think it's maybe the best opening in horror, at least for me. I mean, Scream is obviously up there, Halloween, etc. But 28 Weeks Later, that opening is so incredible. And then after that, it's pretty dumb. The screenplay is terrible. There's so many things that don't add up or make any sense at all. It's got a great cast. You know, Rose Byrne, Jeremy Renner. You got a young Imogen Poots in there, Robert Carlyle. But it's just such a stupid movie. They tried to do the same kind of thing, like making an Aliens to 28 Days Later's Alien, where it was more action heavy. And yeah, it's not very well directed. The script is horrible, and I don't think it holds up. Meanwhile, The Night Eats the World is like another Pontypool situation where I think it's quite inventive. It boils down zombie horror into a more basic kind of blueprint where it's just like one guy in a apartment building, and it's him trying to kind of fend off boredom, isolation, loneliness, and it doesn't sound super entertaining, but I connect with it a lot. I think it's very well made. There are some scenes I think are gorgeous, and it gets my vote.
Yeah, I am, I think, slightly higher on 28 Weeks than you are. I do think everything you said about 28 Weeks is pretty like on the money. Definitely a top 10, if not top 5 opening in horror. Honestly, it's probably in the top 50 at a minimum openings in cinema. Just really great opening in that movie. The first 20 or so minutes of 28 Weeks Later is really, really well done. And then it just slowly gets worse the longer it goes. Which is not to say that it ever is bad. I think it kind of ends being just kind of good, which compared to 28 Days Later is like a step down, a pretty significant step down. And we watched The Night Eats the World together the first time I watched it. And I thought it was...
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. And I say, I'm going to use the word fun to talk about horror movies a lot over the history of this podcast. I mean different things every single time. But generally, if I call a movie fun, it means I enjoyed it to an extent. There are moments in this that are kind of like traditionally fun. This movie is also kind of slow in parts and a little dour.
Yeah.
And really introspective, which if you want a crazy action zombie movie, might not be your slice of cake. You might want a 28 Weeks Later. That being said, I think you've swayed me. I think my vote would be The Night Eats the World, because I think as a movie overall, it's just better made and very competent, and people should watch it.
Yeah, definitely. Check it out. And I think Prentice makes a very good point that I forgot to mention, that yes, it is a lot more slow and introspective. So yeah, if you want like fun zombie action, you're not going to enjoy it. So just have good expectations and yeah, or a lot of other ones on here for that matter. But yeah, just have realistic expectations and you should enjoy it. At least I hope. So going on to the next one, we have the number 5 versus number 12 on the bottom left side of the bracket. We have Demons, the Lamberto Bava 1985 movie versus The Dead Don't Die.
Okay, so I will happily admit that I hadn't seen either of these movies before this. So I went to look up clips from them, and watching clips from Demons, I was like, cool, this is a movie. It felt Argento-esque. It felt very kind of, you have a much more of your finger on the pulse in terms of what giallo is. For me, it's very much a vibe more than like a specific subgenre of movies, but it kind of felt like it fit in there pretty well. I started watching clips of The Dead Don't Die, and I watched all of them that I could find. It's really fun, a killer cast. It's not going to beat any movie I think that it comes up against, except maybe Demons. I'll have to reconsider that in the next round. But for me, it's fun. It's way more of a comedy than a zombie movie, which I think does hinder it. It's very deadpan, which is not something that is kind of universally beloved in terms of zombie movies. But Bill Murray puts in a really fun kind of deadpan role in this. Adam Driver's really great in this as well. Selena Gomez makes an appearance, which is always good or terrible. And in this instance, it seemed fine. Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, The Dead Don't Die was more fun and interesting as an idea. So I would vote for that.
I'm gonna vote for Demons because I have seen both of these. Demons, it's such a goofy movie. It's so 80s. It is such an 80s movie, but it is very fun. It does have that giallo quality where there's a lot of dubbing and it can be really funny unintentionally, and that alone can be worth the price of admission for some. The gore is top notch. It is such a gory movie. The effects are incredible. And The Dead Don't Die to me is just a super forgettable, like bland zombie comedy. I watched it on TV, I think around Halloween, and I've already forgotten literally the entire movie. Like if I had a gun to my head, I couldn't recall a scene. And so I want to vote for Demons here because I would rather rewatch that. There's a lot of it that I can vividly picture. And again, it's just such a fun, gory movie.
That's fair. You've seen the whole of these movies, and I've seen clips from both. Yeah. So I'm happy to defer to you and let Demons move forward on this one.
Okay, so we avoid the upset, the 5 seed beats the 12 seed. And we're going to move on to the 4 versus the 13. On the lower left, we have Zombie 2, or just Zombie Flesh Eaters, depending on where you are, versus Quarantine, the 2008 John Eric Dowdle directed remake of Wreck.
This is another one where I'm so lukewarm on both these movies. I think the original Zombie is probably better, but I'm only slightly less lukewarm on that movie. Quarantine is not as good as Wreck. It's a pretty clear step down and a very blatant just cash grab ripoff that was completely unnecessary. That being said, I think if I had to rewatch one of these two movies, it would probably be Quarantine. So I think that has to get my vote just for that.
No, Quarantine is dog ass. You know how much it's almost on the level of Day of the Dead to me. I think it's horrible. Nothing about Wreck that made it work is present in Quarantine, where it's an obvious soundstage. Everything is terrible and completely stripped down. Zombie 2, which firstly, I don't like the fact that they called it Zombie 2, the reason they did, even though it's not a sequel to anything, this is really messed up, honestly. So Dawn of the Dead, the Romero film, went by just the name Zombie in at least Italy, or I don't know if it was like all of Europe or just Italy, but either way, they wanted to trick people, like almost a Asylum movie, you know, like how they do like Atlantic Rim or something like that. They wanted to trick people into thinking that it was a sequel to that movie and was connected, so they called it Zombie 2, even though it's obviously its own thing, which is pretty messed up. I really hate that. But as a movie, I still like it more, just because, again, I think Quarantine is like bottom of the barrel. It's like one of the worst things I've ever seen. And so, yeah, I want to move Zombie Flesh Eaters along.
I'm happy to refer to you on that. I know you hate Quarantine with a passion. So I'm
sorry,
happy
I can't allow that.
Yeah, so. I'm happy to let you just dumpster on Quarantine.
Next round, we have Dawn of the Dead. I believe this is the 4 and the 13 on this side. Like it really matters, but for the 6 and 11, either way. Dawn of the Dead 2004, the Zack Snyder remake, versus Black Sheep, which I believe is either like Australian or New Zealand. And it's a mid-2000s, not very well-known comedy about like zombie sheep.
Yeah, I watched clips for this. Again, I hadn't seen Black Sheep. I'm gonna be super shocked if anyone comes into our comments and says like, "How have you not seen Black Sheep? It's one of the
Yeah.
funniest, best horror movies." Okay, if you say so. It seemed pretty funny. It seemed amusing. It's a New Zealand horror comedy, which has got to be good to an extent. Um, but it's not better than Dawn of the Dead, even the remake, because none of us have heard of it. And if it was better than Dawn of the Dead, we'd have heard of it.
Yeah, and we of course did a whole episode on it. You know how much I love that movie. And that's a almost like a sleeper favorite in the bracket for me. So I'm gonna move that along. Black Sheep, I watched it when I was younger. I think I was like 14 or something. I was watching a lot of kind of like B movie type things that were sort of obscure and that were available to me through like Comcast, through like their free movie selection. I do not remember like anything about it. And so yeah, Dawn of the Dead, think it's great, and we're gonna move that along. And we are going to get to our number 3 seed versus the number 14. On the bottom left side, we have Cemetery Man by Robert Fuest. I'm probably not saying his name right. Versus Rec 3 Genesis.
I don't have to have seen Cemetery Man, which I haven't. I've watched quite a few clips for it, though. It seemed very interesting. I don't have to have seen it to know that it's better than Rec 3.
Yeah, I am going to be honest. This is one I haven't seen, but Rec 3 is bad. That's one where in the past couple months I have rewatched that one. It's not good. And I was going to watch Cemetery Man. It's been on my watch list for a long time. I've known about it for a while, but they're actually playing it in theaters here soon. So I'm kind of like saving myself to be able to, experience it in theaters instead of just watching it on my PC, because I do like that kind of thing. So yeah, I will watch it when that drops here for me. But just by the fact that Rec 3 is bad, we're gonna move it along, and then we're gonna get to our number 7 versus number 10. In the bottom left, we have I Am Legend versus Blood Quantum.
I think the idea behind Blood Quantum is so good that the movie itself is a disappointment just in comparison to that idea. I'm the actual movie I'm super lukewarm on. And this is going to be super controversial. I think I Am Legend is pretty good. I think it's a fun action movie. I don't think it's a horror movie. I think there are some spooky scenes, but I think it's a pretty fun action movie with a couple very good emotional beats. And there's a reason that most of us have heard of it.
Yeah, I do like Will Smith in that movie. I'm tempted to move Blood Quantum along, at least for me, to vote for it, just because of how much I hate the ending of I Am Legend. And I can't remember if it was the original ending or if it was just an alternate one.
It was a reshot.
Where it's like, where like he realizes that basically he's the monster they've been terrified of. That's such a better ending.
It's the ending of the book.
1,000 times better.
The studio stepped in. It was that was the original ending that was filmed, and the studio stepped in and they were like, "We want a Will Smith action movie. Why are you doing this right at the end?" And they were like, "Fine." He kills himself. He blows himself up. Are you happy?
It has to end in an explosion, and that's another reason why, if you're a studio, trust the people that you hired to make a creative product and stop pigeonholing them and giving them stupid stuff, and just let them be the creative people that they are and carry out their ideas. Yeah. Especially when they already have a blueprint like the book. That's good that they can just kind of copy from that. So despite that, yeah, I agree with your assessment on Blood Quantum, and I'll still just move I Am Legend along. And then we're going to get to our last matchup for the side. This will be the first half of the bracket. We have the number 2 versus the number 15. We have Dan O'Bannon's The Return of the Living Dead versus Quarantine 2 Terminal, a movie that a lot of people probably have never heard of watching this.
Which is kind of a shame, because I've seen Quarantine 2, and it's better than Quarantine 1.
No.
No, hear me out. It's not a better movie, but it's better than Quarantine 1 because it's at least its own concept. I think the idea of being in an airport is really fun. Kind of a fun take on a zombie outbreak. It's got much higher stakes and scope than the first 2 Rec movies and the first Quarantine movie, which I think is also fun. That being said, Return of the Living Dead is an absolute jam. Like, an absolute fucking gangbusters movie that's kind of insane, incredibly horny for no reason, super fun. It's basically what Christian moms think 80s horror movies are, like boiled down to their essence. And so it's got to be that for me. Like that's just, it's super fun. It's a great movie and people should watch it.
Yeah, I just watched it in preparation for this. Another one that I've been meaning to for a long time. And yeah, Return of the Living Dead is so fun. And yeah, it's one that's right around the 90-minute mark. Very snackable, very short, easy, breezy kind of watch. And yeah, extremely fun. Also, great effects, great gore, good cast. You got Linnea Quigley in there, and you got the Tar Man, who's a lot of fun. So yeah, it's going to move on, and we're going to get to our second side of the bracket, the other half. The number 1 seed versus the 16. On this side, we have Romero's Dawn of the Dead versus Doom.
Okay, it's Dawn of the Dead. We don't have to have this conversation.
Yeah, you just want to move on?
Yeah, Doom's bad. We're good. Move on.
Yeah, Doom sucks. I will say, though, I actually liked that movie a lot when I was like 14, and I would watch it like all the freaking time.
I
would like have it on repeat.
This is a secret for listeners. One of my favorite movies to just kind of throw on and watch is a movie that I accept is really bad, really bad. And I know it's a bad movie and I recognize it's bad when I watch it, but it's still super fun and I love it. And it's Chronicles of Riddick. And so nothing Joe says about like, oh, I watched this movie when I was young can ever taint his movie opinions for me because I willingly watch Chronicles of Riddick like once every year or so.
I was gonna guess Jason X.
No, that's a great movie. I would never say that movie's bad.
We're gonna talk about that at some point. Or it'd be kind of funny as like a gag if we just like always bring it up
and then never
bring up our
review
differing views, but we just never talk about it in depth. All right, we're gonna go to our next one. We got the 8 versus the 9. We got Slither, the James Gunn movie, versus White Zombie, the one from the early 30s.
This is a real shame for White Zombie because I'm sure it's innovative. I'm sure it did a lot for the genre. I think Slither's really fun, and White Zombie's a movie that I hadn't heard of before this list. So it's Slither.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I can actually see that. It's I actually watched it today, and it's definitely not on the level of a lot of those kind of 30s early horror classics like Dracula or Bride of Frankenstein or one of those. I'm not sure if it's just okay, so there's a lot of issues with sometimes like the cuts and the sound kind of cutting out and just the overall sound quality. I'm not sure if that was how it actually was made and produced or if that's more of a problem with how it was preserved or restored or something. But there are some issues with that. There's a character who like goes to deliver a line and he like kind of stammers, and I don't think it was done intentionally. I think he just like fucked up his line and tried it like 3 times in the same shot. But yeah, it's not bad. It's just fine. And like with Dracula, Bela Lugosi is the best part of it. And just like Dracula, like you would expect, you get a very long push in on his face of him just staring into the screen with the crazy eyes. But it's still going to be Slither. It's really fun. It's James Gunn. And I want to go ahead and move that along.
Yeah. This next one's going to be weird.
Yeah, this one is a hard one for me. It's Night of the Creeps, our 5 seed versus the 12 seed, Cockneys versus Zombies.
I mean, off reputation alone, it's got to be Night of the Creeps. I don't think either of these movies, again, I hadn't seen either of these beforehand. I watched most of the clips for Night of the Creeps. I watched like 3 of them for Cockneys versus Zombies. Night of the Creeps is at least interesting, kind of campy fun. Cockneys versus Zombies seems fun, but who's to say?
Yeah, I have a confession. I have seen neither of these movies.
Yeah.
If anybody's upset about that, like you're just listening to us talk about movies, man. It's not that big a deal. You know, our lack of competitive integrity is not really a problem. But yeah, just for a reputation, I'll just move it along. I'll just mosey it on along to the next round, and I'm just going to move on. We're going to move along to our 4 versus 13 seed. We have Dead Set versus Resident Evil Apocalypse, which is the second movie in that franchise.
It's Dead Set. There's one good Resident Evil movie, and we'll talk about it when we get to it. this Resident Evil Apocalypse isn't. They really were just basically like, hey, people like that first one, and Mila Jovovich is attractive. Can we make money off of this? And the answer was yes, which is really stupid. But yeah, Dead Set's fun, and that's about all it needs to be better than Resident Evil Apocalypse.
Yeah, I didn't realize at first that it's actually a mini series. This was from the UK, and I was tempted to disqualify it because I wanted to do movies only. But the overall runtime is that of a longer movie, so it's fine. I did watch it in preparation. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And Resident Evil Apocalypse, so a while back, I actually would say like it's the best one hands down. I remember being terrified of it as a kid. A lot of scenes that really stuck out in my memory. For the most part, I think it's more toned down in terms of the ridiculous Resident Evil kind of stuff in regard to the monsters and different designs and action set pieces. This one maybe feels the most horror, if you know what I mean, and less action compared to a lot of them. And I like that a lot, but oh my God, I rewatched this for the first time in years, like well over a decade. It came on TV during this last Halloween season. This movie's fucking garbage.
Really
this is like one of the most poorly shot, poorly lit, poorly written movies I've ever seen. It is garbage. I was like, oh my God, how did I defend this movie? This is terrible. So yeah, so Dead Set's gonna move along. And we're gonna get into our 6 versus 11. We have Dead and Buried versus Romero's Land of the Dead.
This is... Neither of these movies have any real significance to me. Land of the Dead, I think, at least is more interesting as a concept. I don't know. I think both these movies are kind of just whatever. I don't need another rural zombie movie. I'm sorry, Dead and Buried. Land of the Dead, I like the scale. I think the cast is really fun. John Leguizamo's in it. Dennis Hopper's in it. The guy who plays the Mentalist is in it, which threw me for a loop. So yeah, I think for me it's Land of the Dead, but I really have no strong opinions about either of these movies.
Yeah, I actually just watched Dead and Buried like a couple hours before this podcast, and it's pretty fine. It's not bad. Land of the Dead, it's really when Romero was falling off. A lot of those later movies, which we'll talk about, they're all in this bracket. They're pretty terrible, but Land of the Dead is still okay. I think it's really fun. Dead and Buried, I think, this is one where I am a little split because I think Dead and Buried is technically a lot better, but Land of the Dead to me is kind of more fun.
Which
and
one
maybe
would
it's
you
just
want
because
to
I've been
watch
so
again?
burnt out watching a billion. Exactly. Like maybe it's because I'm so burnt out on zombie movies and I don't want to watch one for 5 years now. I would pick Land of the Dead. If I had both like a Blu-ray, both of them in my hand, I would pop in Land of the Dead first. So we're going to move that one on along. And we're going to get to our 3 seed versus 14. In this upper right, we have Wreck versus Resident Evil Afterlife.
You can call it Afterlife. It's bad. It's a bad movie. It's Wreck.
Yeah, I didn't mean to do that, of course, but I thought about it afterward.
I know Wreck is one of your favorite horror movies. I think it's very good. I don't know if I'd necessarily rate it quite as highly as you would. But when it's up against any of the Resident Evil movies, it's gonna absolutely blow them out of the water.
Yeah, we'll move it along. Also, wow, the Resident Evil movies have so many entries into this bracket, and it's going to be so hilarious, but not unexpected. They all drop in the first round.
Well, we'll fight over one of them, I think.
Okay.
But we won't fight over the rest of them.
We're going to get into the 7 versus the 10 seed. We got Planet Terror versus #Alive.
I really liked #Alive. This is another one we watched together. I thought it was fun. I thought it was a very interesting kind of... I'm gonna say foreign, but I want people to not take that the wrong way. Because it is... I believe #Alive is Korean.
It is.
And it's a very interesting take on zombies from a... from a foreign perspective, from a perspective of a different society and how they view things, and it's very different from how I have viewed things my entire life. And for me, it was interesting enough that I would put it ahead. But Planet Terror is super fun, super campy. It's a blast if you need a movie to watch.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna vote Planet Terror. It's a Robert Rodriguez movie, extremely fun. Not my favorite. That would definitely be From Dusk Till Dawn, which I would love to talk about on the podcast one day. And Alive to me is so mid. It's like a 5 out of 10. I just think it's fine. It I don't like the third act very much with when they get into like that one dude's apartment and it's the very
I thought
at this
that was
point
super
kind of
fun.
cliched. Nah, I didn't really care for that as much. I don't really like the third act of the movie. It loses me a little bit. I think it's okay. It's definitely not bad. It's just very to me. And again, Planet Terror is so over the top and fun that I kind of want to move that along.
I enjoy Planet Terror, so I'm not opposed to just moving it along. But I want to say that I did enjoy #Alive quite a bit.
Yeah, it's cool. A lot of people did. Let me also state with the record that I'm not coercing Prentice in any way.
No,
He's just not. For all these ones where he's kind of deferring, it's just because he's not very passionate about those in particular.
We'll fight
So,
over some movies in a little bit.
Yeah, I have another tab pulled up with a coin flip. That's just the two of us. So
No.
now for our last one, in the upper right, we have the number 2 versus the 15 seed. We have Brain Dead, also known as Dead Alive, and Survival of the Dead, which is another Romero zombie movie.
Yeah, it's Dead Alive. We don't have to have a conversation over this. It's Dead Alive.
Yeah, Survival of the Dead sucks. That's when Romero had completely fallen off. Brain Dead I just watched last night, and oh my god, it's so fun.
It's
I will
so
be
fun.
honest. I'll be honest, I wasn't really liking the first half that much. In the first half, I didn't like a lot of the gags. Not many things really made me laugh or anything. And maybe this is like sacrilege because it's Peter Jackson, but I wasn't a fan of just all the push zooms and how like everything was shot in close-ups and everything. There was like some framing I didn't like, but yeah, the entire second half, especially that whole third act, is sublime. It is the most over-the-top, crazy, goofy, gory, what the fuck kind of movie in all the best ways, and it firmly gets the vote. And we're gonna go into our bottom right of the bracket. We got the number 1 versus the 16. We have, of course, as you would expect, Night of the Living Dead versus Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City.
It's Night of the Living Dead. We can move on.
Yep.
We're going to talk about that movie a lot more coming up. We don't need to talk about it right now.
Yeah, so now the next one, we have the Battle of Mid. We have The Girl with All the Gifts versus Anna and the Apocalypse.
I think The Girl with All the Gifts is at least an interesting idea. I think it's competently made to an extent. And I think it's much better than Anna versus the Apocalypse, or Anna and the Apocalypse.
Yeah, agreed. It's got some sequences that really stand out. I like that kind of scene where they're all breaking out of like the military facility and this really long, fluid takes with a lot of action and people getting eaten and everything. That one poor soldier who like made it to the gate, got out of his vehicle, unlocked the gate for everybody, and then like died right as he was about to get back into his car. Like, poor guy. And then the ending is pretty great. I love the dour ending. We both love a good sad ending.
Yeah.
Downer
If
ending.
it's carried off.
Yeah, it does that pretty well. And Anna and the Apocalypse is a musical, and that's not balling to me. So we're gonna move on to our next matchup.
Joe's
We got
opinions
the
on
number
musicals
5.
do not represent the opinions of the Killed Off Screen podcast.
No, I don't hate musicals, but I don't know. It's not what I want when I'm watching a zombie movie. You know what I mean?
That's fair.
So getting to our number 5 versus 12. On the bottom right, we have The City of the Dead versus the first Resident Evil.
All right. You're going to have to come with me here. This first Resident Evil movie is
I don't know.
fun as hell. It's not good.
That's fair.
It's not good, but of all of the Resident Evil movies, it's really fun. It's surprisingly competently shot, which makes sense once you realize Paul W.S. Anderson directed. I think of all of them, it's the only one with an actual script. And I think between these two movies, if you put them both in front of me, I would rather watch Resident Evil, and by probably a pretty considerable margin.
Yeah, it's definitely one where one is more slow and the other one is just very fun. Very different types of movies. City of the Dead is more of like a witchcraft movie, and I love that it's Christopher Lee. I like freaked out one of the first scenes. It's like his first line, and So you know the song Dracula by Rob Zombie? I think we all do. Where at the beginning you just hear a voice say like a yeah, it's that line right before the actual instrumental kicks in, and that's where the quote is from. It's from Christopher Lee in City of the Dead, and I didn't know that until earlier today, and I was like freaking out. So I just love learning things like that. I don't know why, but yeah, it's not bad. It's made in 1960, and it's a really amazing coincidence because spoiler for the movie, it does the Psycho thing where this woman ventures off to this different town, and that's like the entire first half of the movie, and it sucks because she's really likable. It's not the typical kind of urban like city slicker kid from college goes to a rural town like we see in horror a lot, and they're like degrading people and talking down to them like zoo animals. She's very respectful. She's very inquisitive, and she gets fucking sacrificed and she dies like halfway through the movie, like Janet Leigh in Psycho. And I think it's pretty cool to happen in the same year. I think it's a better movie, but I will just give it to you. I don't know. I want to commit to the bit. I want all the Resident Evil movies to lose in the first.
I think of all of them, Resident Evil is the only one that deserves to make it out of round one. The original Resident
That's
Evil.
fine, and you've deferred on a lot of these. I'll pay it back a little bit.
I'm gonna end up deferring on this next one.
Okay. This one's a pretty cut and dry one. We got I Walk with a Zombie. This is the 4 versus 13 seed. We have I Walk with a Zombie versus Army of the Dead, the Zack Snyder movie. Go ahead.
So I've only seen one of these movies. I've seen Army of the Dead. I think stylistically it's kind of fun for a zombie movie. I think it does the thing that we all want in zombie movies where someone just unloads a fucking minigun into a crowd of zombies and they get turned into paste. That's super fun. That's great. They drop a nuke on Las Vegas, which, great. Good riddance. Other than that...
Hey, it's Las Vegas, not New Jersey, all right?
Jersey can be second. Other than that, it's not really anything as a movie. I couldn't find a single clip from I Walked with a Zombie, so I have to vote for Army of the Dead by default.
I've seen both of these. Army of the Dead is very bad. It's tone deaf. Like, none of the characters take the zombie threat seriously. I think Dave Bautista is great in it, but very, very stupid and infuriating and overlong movie. I think that movie is like 2.5 hours or something. And I Walk with a Zombie is really good. Jacques Tourneur from early 40s. And yeah, it's still in that territory of like zombies as products of voodoo. I Walk with a Zombie does explore a lot regarding slavery, racism, colonialism, and it's a lot in a very small package of only about an hour. And again, Army of the Dead is terrible, and I Walk with a Zombie is a classic, so I want to move that along.
Yeah, go for it.
Alrighty, on to the next one. We have another Fulci movie. It says City of the Living Dead. Because yeah, there's City of the Dead and City of the Living Dead versus Scout's Guide to the Apocalypse, which is a Christopher Landon movie before he really blew up. And this is our 6 versus 11.
I couldn't find anything on City of the Living Dead. I've never seen it. I have seen Scout's Guide to the Apocalypse. Pretty fun. So I'm going to vote for that by default.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. City of the Living Dead, to me, is like the Beyond, but not as good. It's got a lot of the same stuff, because it's Fulci. Gore, zombies, portal to hell, all this kind of stuff. But, the Beyond is just a much better version, and we already moved that along. So, yeah, I'll go with you. Scout's Guide to the next round. And we are going to talk about now our number 3 versus number 14. We have Island of Lost Souls versus Romero's Diary of the Dead.
We don't need to we don't need to have this conversation. It's Island of Lost Souls. This is a weird one to get hung up on in any capacity.
Yeah, I watched Diary quite a while back. I think it came out in 2007 or 2009 or something. It came out in that found footage boom. And I remember being like, wow, this movie's really bad. George Romero made this garbage. And then I rewatched it only a couple months ago. And then I was like, wow, this movie's really bad. Romero made this garbage. So, yeah, Island of Lost Souls, we're going to move that along. And now we have our 7 versus 10. We got Dead Snow 2 versus World War Z.
Okay. Dead Snow 2, fun, has all the same funness of the original one. I think World War Z is a really good movie. I do think it struggles at just in between the second and third act. There's kind of some serious awkwardness because the third act was basically entirely reshot once the movie had closed production. So that kind of sucks. But I think once it gets into the third act proper, it's pretty good, and really fun. And I think that it's just simply a better movie.
Um, so this is the problem. World War Z to me is very boring.
Mm.
And Dead Snow 2, it's another one of those situations where one is just a lot more fun than the other. Dead Snow 2 takes the more over the top nature. We've used that phrase a lot. I'm sorry, we're using the words like fun and like over the top and everything. We're kind of overusing them, but a lot of the movies here fall into those camps, so give us a break. But yeah, we talked about the first Dead Snow being over the top. This one really cranks it up to 11, and it's way more of a comedy. Dead Snow is at least like halfway a horror movie. It's at least trying to be kind of scary at times, especially in the build up to everything. Dead Snow 2 is just like outwardly a comedy. And I want to vote for it because I can remember a lot of things from it. There are some things that were really outrageous to make me laugh. World War Z, I've forgotten almost everything. And Dead Snow 2 has a scene of Nazi zombies using a tank to blow up a mother walking with her carriage with her baby. And that's beautiful, and I want to move it along for that reason.
I think I'm gonna fight you on this one. I don't think Dead Snow 2 landed at all for me. I think they really did go for it, and I can respect that in terms of like, okay, we're just gonna really lean into how over the top goofy this premise is. I think World War Z has a ton of really great scenes. The entirety of like the zombies taking over Jerusalem is great. There's a scene where Brad Pitt has to basically, like, third act, he injects himself with a disease and has to walk through the zombies. It's an interesting take on zombies as a virus and as a like conceptually it's a really good take on zombies. Obviously, I think it comes with a little bit of the burden of carrying the novel that it was based on, which is completely different and better by a wide margin because it's truly very good. But yeah, I think for me, World War Z is just a better and more fun movie.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and give it to you for the reason that I'm looking at the next matchup,
yeah.
and it's gonna get it's gonna get 50-40 forward by the movie that's gonna win this one. We have the number 2 versus the number 15. We have Train to Busan, which I'm sure many of you have been waiting for us to say that title. There it is. It's the number 2 on the side versus Resident Evil: The Final Chapter. Can we just move Train to Busan?
Yeah, I've already moved it on mine.
Okay. Yeah, Train to Busan's great. Resident Evil Final Chapter, not great. All right, so we're going back at the top left. We are in the second round, and we have One Cut of the Dead versus Rec 2.
It's One Cut of the Dead. Move on.
Yeah, One Cut of the Dead.
It's not. That's
We're
not
likely
close.
going to move through these. Yeah, we've dissected these movies to some degree. We kind of talked about like our pros and cons. We're probably going to move a little faster through these next rounds, unless we fight on some of them. Then we'll get into them a little more. But yeah, next one we have The Beyond versus Zombieland.
It's Zombieland for me.
Agreed. Yeah, Zombieland. Now we have Pontypool versus 28 Days Later.
Okay, I want to once again give a shout out to Pontypool. People should watch it. If you haven't seen it and you enjoy these kind of horror movies, go watch Pontypool. It is 28 Days Later.
Yeah, I feel bad because Pontypool's great, and I would have loved to have seen it move on more, but it was just up against a Goliath of a movie in 28 Days Later. So now on to the next one. We have Dead Snow versus Day of the Dead.
It's Day of the Dead.
Yeah, definitely. Now, onto the lower left, we got Shaun of the Dead versus The Night Eats the World.
I mean, it's shout out again to Night Eats the World. It's Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, it's the exact same situation with Pontypool. Underrated movie, very slept on. More people should watch it. More people should know about it, but it was just up against a great one. So Sean moves on. Now we have Demons versus Zombie 2.
I might just let you make the decision here. I think I lean towards Demons, but
Yeah, they're both very similar because they kind of again have more of that Italian, lots of dubbing and kind of awkwardness kind of vibe. But Demons just is more entertaining, so I'm gonna move that along. Now we have Dawn of the Dead 04 versus Cemetery Man.
I think it's Dawn of the Dead 04, but I'm not like it's not as easy a decision as some of the previous ones.
Yeah, I mean for me it is because I like Dawn of the Dead 04 a lot more, so it is for me. I'm gonna go ahead and most of that along. Now we have I Am Legend versus Return of the Living Dead.
props to I Am Legend for making it out of round one. It's Return of the Living Dead here. This movie's a blast, and you should all go watch it.
Definitely. Don't have anything more to add on that. Now we're at the top right. We've got Dawn of the Dead 78 versus Slither.
I think this is Dawn of the Dead, but Slither's a really fun movie. So if you had a really strong opinion about Slither, you might be able to convince me.
I do not. I want to move Dawn along.
Fair enough.
Now we have Night of the Creeps versus Dead Set.
It's super weird that either of these movies are moving on. I'm going to be super honest. I think it's Dead Set for me.
Yeah, again, I haven't seen Night of the Creeps. Sorry.
Oh, okay. But then it's Dead Set. I'm making the
Yeah,
decision.
I mean, yeah, Dead Set I've actually watched, so I can attest to it. And yeah, I would totally watch it again. Now we have Land of the Dead versus Wreck.
It's Wreck. Just put Land of the Dead out of its misery. 2 to the back of the head for Land of the Dead.
And now we have 2 really, really goofy, fun ones. Planet Terror versus Brain Dead.
I think for me, it's Brain Dead. I refer to it as Dead Alive because that's the title I knew it as when I first watched it. And I think it's just a little more outlandish and kind of capturing than Planet Terror for me.
Yeah, I think it's also quite a bit shorter as well, which is a plus. So now we have Night of the Living Dead versus The Girl with All the Gifts.
It's Night of the Living Dead. We don't need to have this conversation.
Oh yeah, don't worry. I'm not trying to make some argument here. Now we got Resident Evil versus I Walked with a Zombie.
I'm going to once again say Resident Evil because I think if you gave me both of those movies, I'd rather watch Resident Evil. And both of these are getting blown out of the water next round. So for me, I'm going to ride the Resident Evil train. I think that's a fun ass movie.
I don't know if I can let you do that.
We might have to coin flip.
I Walk with a Zombie is a classic. We may have to. We'll do it so that way if I don't get my way, then I can be like, hey, I tried to stop it. I didn't agree to move Resident Evil along past I Walk with a Zombie.
I'll take the hate if Resident Evil moves on.
Okay. We've gotten out of the way. We'll go ahead and do it. We're flipping a coin.
Calling heads.
Oh, wait, hang on. We didn't call it. All right. Yeah, you go ahead and call it.
Okay, I'm calling heads again. Yes!
You got it. All right, Resident Evil moves along in the biggest upset of the bracket so far. All right, now we have Scout's Guide to the Apocalypse versus Island of Lost Souls.
I think it's Island of Lost Souls, but I don't have super strong opinions on either of these movies.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and move it along. Now we got World War Z versus Train to Busan. Do I even need to finish reading
I'm not
the
fighting for World War Z. I do think it's better than a lot of people gave it credit for, and I think if people rewatched it, they would find that it's a very fun action zombie movie. But it is Last Train to Busan.
Yeah. So now we're going back to the top left. We are in the Sweet 16 now. We have One Cut of the Dead versus Zombieland. 2 good zombie comedies.
I've got to go with Zombieland here. I think it's much more of a zombie movie for me.
Yeah, I like One Cut way more. I think One Cut is just way better, but I kind of have to disqualify it here. I wanted it to get out of those first couple matchups, but I got to disqualify it because, again, it isn't even really technically actually a zombie movie.
It's
and Zombieland is, so I think by default.
It's like calling Bodies, Bodies, Bodies a slasher.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it. All right, now we are on to 28 Days Later versus Day of the Dead.
I'm going to say this is a very tough choice, but I'm going to go with 28 Days Later.
Agreed. I'm really glad that you didn't say Day of the Dead.
Because we'd fight over it.
I didn't have to fight you on it. Yeah. So I'm glad we're still in agreement on that one. Now we have Shaun of the Dead versus Demons.
I'm going Shaun of the Dead all the way.
Yep. Shaun moves on again. We've got Dawn of the Dead 04 versus Return of the Living Dead. This is a tougher one.
I'm going with Return of the Living Dead. I think that movie is so fun. Again, super horny for no reason. Really great effects, practical effects from the time. Just a blast, and I think a lot more people should watch it, and it should really be included on more lists like this.
I think I like Dawn a little more. I mean, they're very different. Tonally, they're very different. I think Dawn is just a little better. Return of the Living Dead, I have some issues with it, on more of a technical level. I think they're both very good at what they are and what they want to be, but I think Dawn is just like a better made movie.
I'm happy to give you Dawn here with the stipulation that it's going to get just smoked by Shaun of the Dead.
Sure, we'll just go ahead and do that then. All right, top right, we have Dawn of the Dead original versus Dead Set.
This is Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah,
This one's not
it's
close.
a closer one for me than I would think maybe, but yeah, it's Dawn. Now we have Wreck versus Dead Alive.
Uh, I think I know that you're gonna lock in Wreck on this and fight me all the way. So I think I enjoyed Dead Alive more as a movie just because it's kind of insane. But I will let you move Wreck along.
Yeah, Wreck is a lot shorter. It's like 78 minutes or something. Even though Dead Alive is pretty short on its own, which is nice. But if I enjoyed the first half of Dead Alive more, then I would be willing to
Yeah.
consider that argument more. But yeah, Wreck to me is one of the best freaking horror movies just ever made.
We look.
No.
Rest in peace, my sweet prince, Resident Evil. But Night of the Living Dead is moving on.
Yeah.
We aren't gonna say that they're in a competition.
Yeah, like, we're gonna move it along before I even announce the two competitors in that side of the bracket. And now we have Train to Busan versus Island of Lost Souls.
I think it's Train to Busan.
Yeah, I do think it's a little overrated, but
Yeah, I don't think it's revolutionized zombies the way that some people kind of lauded it to when it first came out. But I do think it's a much better movie, and I'd rather watch it than Island of Lost Souls.
yep. And so now we are on to the Elite Eight. We have in the upper left, we got Zombieland and 28 Days Later.
Now, look, I do think I would rather watch Zombieland on any given Tuesday over 28 Days Later, but 28 Days Later is a better movie, so it's going to have to get the vote just because it's overall a much better movie.
Yeah, agreed. Freaking love it. And now we're gonna go to Shaun of the Dead versus Dawn of the Dead '04.
Sean is blowing Dawn of the Dead out of the water.
No, I think I like.
They're not in
I'll
the
go ahead
same
and move
tax
Shaun of the
bracket.
Dead along.
They're not in the same. You don't make
No,
a-
it's okay.
yeah.
I moved it along. Yeah, Shaun of the Dead wins, but it's a lot closer for me. But again, we've already established I like Dawn way more.
Yeah.
And I like Dawn way more than just about everybody out there. So, but yeah, Shaun of the Dead is better. When I think about it a little more, I've watched '04 Dawn of the Dead more, but Shaun's better. So we'll just go ahead and move those along. So now to the top right, we got Dawn of the Dead versus Wreck.
This is a tough.
Yeah.
I think for me it's Dawn of the Dead. I think it's too influential as a movie. I think it's really well made. I think it's super fun. And I think it's one that I'd choose to watch more often than I would choose to watch Wreck. And they're super close. I think all of the final 8, final 4, maybe not all of the final 8. Sorry, Dawn of the Dead '04. They're all very good movies and deserve a lot of credit. And the decisions are really hard. But for me, I think it's Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, and you know me, I am the biggest fan of Wreck. That is like practically a 5 out of 5 for me. But I don't think I can move it along over Romero's Dawn of the Dead. It feels like sacrilege to me. And they're both great. And yeah, we'll go ahead and move Dawn. And I'm realizing now this is going to be a really interesting matchup in the final four because for this last one of the Elite Eight, we have Night of the Living Dead versus Train to Busan.
Okay, so I just gave Train to Busan a lot of credit. I do think I don't think it was like a full revitalization of zombie movies, but it definitely gave it a little bit of a kickstart. It was really beneficial to the genre and to kind of Asian horror kind of re-emerging into the scene kind of as a whole. That being said, it does not compare to Night of the Living Dead in any capacity, and Night of the Living Dead should be moving on here.
Yeah, for sure. Night of the Living Dead. Again, I like Train to Busan. I don't like it as much as most people. Where I think a lot of people are like, it's like the best zombie movie ever. I'm like, no, it's good. It's just very formulated to me, and I don't love it, but I do think it's good. So we now have our final four, which is 28 Days Later, Shaun of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Night of the Living Dead. So let's go ahead and do our left side matchup. We got 20 Days Later and Shaun of the Dead.
I'm going Shaun of the Dead the whole way. I love this movie. It's one of my all-time favorites. I watched this movie for the first time with my mom, who also really loves this movie. Me and my mom actually share a lot of horror opinions, mainly because she introduced me to a lot of my like younger horror movies. I love the tons of background gags in Shaun of the Dead, and I love that it. Again, I think it is the perfect balance of comedy and horror while still getting the best of both genres and not losing anything to the other as well. Um, and so I think for me, it's got to be Shaun of the Dead. I do think 28 Days Later is a banging movie though.
I gotta go 28. I absolutely love it. It's one of my all-time favorites, and I think one thing that gives it an edge is that Shaun of the Dead still is like a parody. And again, I'm not trying to boil it
Mm-hmm.
down to saying it's like just a parody movie. It definitely springboards into being its own kind of property, and it's well beyond just being a parody. But 28, I think, is way more inventive, not only with kind of popularizing the running zombie, but again, the cast, the performances. I think it is really one of a kind. I love that early digital look for it. And I think it's one that really goes beyond being a good zombie movie to where it's just an extremely good film. I think I got to really fight and push for 28 here.
I think this is a coin toss one. I think we have to go to the coin toss just because I don't think I'm gonna move off Shaun of the Dead, and I'm certain I can't convince you to move off of 28 Days Later.
Yeah, I'm tired and hungry, but not that tired and hungry. I'm
Yeah.
still. This is like 11th round in the ring, but I'm still going to bat for
I didn't hear
28
no
days later.
bell.
Yeah. All right, go ahead and call it.
All right, Tails. Oh,
It is heads.
all right. Godspeed 28 Days Later. I can't wait to see you lose in the final.
All right, now this is a tough one. This is a very interesting one. We got the first two Romero Living Dead movies. We have Dawn of the Dead and Night of the Living Dead.
I think this is a tough one for you. It's not as tough for me. For me, it's Night of the Living Dead the whole way. I Night of the Living Dead's in my top 10 horror movies. I was gonna say top 5, but I haven't thought about my top 5 in a long time, and I can't be certain it is. It might be like 6 right now. Um, but one of my all-time favorites. Truly a miracle of a movie, like catching lightning in a bottle. The fact that this movie exists and exists the way it does and is as good as it was and is as influential and iconic as it is. For me, it's got to be Night of the Living Dead, but Dawn of the Dead is a really great movie.
I don't think I agree. I think I like Dawn more. Firstly, you got to remember Night of the Living Dead, that entire second act really drags. Like, that second act is extremely boring. Let's be real. Everybody kind of shuffling along and like changing places in the house and just kind of watching TV. Dawn is super entertaining. I think it takes all the zombie aspects and kind of principles of the first one, the concepts, and really expands it and augments everything about it and just makes it so much better. And again, the cast, love Ken Foree in that movie. And think of David Emsey and his fun zombie walk with the gun stuck on his finger. Think of Gun Zombie. Think of how fun all that is.
As much as I love Gun Zombie, I think Dawn I think Dawn fails in just a couple ways comparatively. I think the ending of Dawn is so much weaker than the ending of Night. There are parts of Dawn of the Dead that really just feel like the movie needed them to happen, so they're happening. I think they take some liberties with zombies that are not carried on in future zombie movies for a reason. And so for me, it's still got to be Night. I don't know. I think Night of the Living Dead as well is just way more influential on zombie media as a whole, on zombie movies as a whole, despite not maybe hitting the exact same like points for copying that Dawn might hit or that 28 Days Later hits. But for me, Night is the zombie movie when I think of zombie movies.
I think I like Dawn more. You know what? I will be nice because 28.
We're going to fight over this
won
last
the
one.
coin toss.
Yeah.
Sean, I will move Night of the Living Dead along. I don't think there's a wrong answer here.
I don't think there is.
You know, these are both great.
But
Yeah.
we're definitely locked in on the opposite sides of the arena on this one.
Okay, so yeah, we're in the final now. We have 28 Days Later and Night of the Living Dead.
Can we call it a tie? I don't know. This is
No, there has to be a winner.
Can we put one in the back of the head of both? Can they both lose? I don't know.
I will tell you what. Hang on. I will say that 28 Days Later is my favorite zombie movie. I'm happy it got this far. I knew Sean was going to be a battle when I saw the bracket because I think that's your number one outside of maybe Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, they're probably tied.
So even though I love it, I don't think I can justify putting it over Night of the Living Dead. So I'm going to surprise you in a way I'm sure you're happy about.
All right. We're going to do the Predator handshake. Joe, you son of a bitch. Yeah, no, I think Night of the Living Dead is I mean, it's as iconic as it is for a reason. It's the movie that made zombie movies, and it's got one of the best starts. I don't think the beginning of it is as good as like a 28 Weeks that we talked about, or even like the beginning quarter of Shaun of the Dead, which I think is just a masterclass in visual storytelling and like implementing a zombie apocalypse through comedy. Excellent. But the beginning of Night is really good, and it really sets a tone that the movie keeps as it does chug along. I think you're right that the second act isn't perfect, but I really like it. I think it serves a very important purpose in the movie. And the ending of the movie is an all-timer. I don't think there's very many movies that end quite as impactfully as Night of the Living Dead does. And just generally, I think we wouldn't have zombie movies as a genre without Night of the Living Dead, the same way that we do
Definitely.
now.
Yeah. So Night of the Living Dead wins. Not a unsurprising result. I don't think anyone can really be upset about it, even though I think there are obviously others on here that as films are better made on a technical level, because obviously Night of the Living Dead was like ultra low budget, but it's freaking Night of the Living Dead. And I also want to say that I absolutely love, probably my favorite scene is that monologue that Dwayne Jones gives when he's talking to Barbara when they first get in the house about like getting out of the diner. I love that monologue so freaking much. And yeah, great movie. We wouldn't have zombie movies without it. It's the OG, and it wins this bracket.
Hell yeah.
That's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Kill It Off Screen podcast. Next one, we have another bracket because we'll be putting out 2 episodes in March, and it's going to be best remakes. So we're going to definitively decide the best horror remake, just like we definitively decided the best zombie movie of all time tonight. Beyond that, if you have any movies that you would like us to watch and possibly review here on the podcast, you can send them in an email suggestion to killitoffscreenpod@gmail.com. These episodes come out every 2 weeks, every other Wednesday, and we thank you for watching. See you in the next one.